Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Dr. Haider Shah. On behalf of Kalwas, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we have another very interesting topic. I'm really honored to welcome and introduce our distinguished guest speaker who last time talked about the making online learning meaningful through the science of learning. What a great session it was. And if you have missed that session, please, we would request that watch this session because in this session, we will be just asking the questions from our renowned speaker, which you people have shared with us. These are really wonderful questions, and these are all the practical problems the teachers and the student are facing. So today, our expert will be telling us all the things which you have asked. So before we start the session, I would like to thank Kalwas for arranging such enlightenment sessions, for their support and providing us such a wonderful platform. The aim of Kalwas is to give you the opportunity to connect and interact with world-renowned speakers, academic leaders, teachers, authors, researchers, experts, professionals, and businessmen to learn from their experiences, recommendations, and suggestions, which will create an impact and will enable you to learn and develop yourself in order to grow and transform individually, as well as to contribute to the world in a positive way. As our slogan is come, learn, and share knowledge. So, as our guest needs not to be introduced, but since for the people who are joining for the first time, let me just introduce him quickly for them. Our guest today is having a wonderful experience in industry and academia, internationally known personality, and we always see him on while contributing to the world in a different way on different platforms. He's a great human being and always ready to share his knowledge. He is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Language and Communication, majoring in the educational technology, computational linguistics, learning sciences, instructional design. He has won several awards at national and international level of various innovation in teaching and learning as well as assistive technology. Moreover, he was also the recipient of unanimous academic award for the teaching award category in 2014, as well as the best e-learning facilitator at International University e-learning Carnival 2016. Previously, he served as the Deputy Director Teaching Excellence 2018 to 2020 and e-learning coordinator 2016 to 2018 at the Center for Applied Learning and Multimedia. Last but not the least, he's a wonderful speaker, author, teacher, researcher, professional, and above everything, a great human being. So please help me in welcoming our guest, Prof. CHUAH. Welcome to the Calvas platform, and thank you very much for joining us again, Prof.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haider, and also to Kalwas for arranging another session, especially to kind of cover the questions from the previous session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and it's really honor and privilege to have you once again. And people really appreciated your last session. They were very happy with your suggestion, and particularly they liked your way of starting it right from the essence of learning, which starts from the what is meaningful, and that part was much appreciated by the audience, and they loved that the prof started with a wonderful way and followed by the science of learning, the different the forgetting curve, the insight from science in that perspective of the peak and effect and the metacognition and so many things. They love that part, that how science is actually involved in that online learning and how you can make it more meaningful. So that was the wonderful part, and thank you very much for doing such a wonderful job, and I must congratulate you on such a wonderful job you have done last time. And they have requested a lot for the question answer session because last time it was left. So, and thank you for giving us again your precious time just to share your views on that. And people have the concern, and in this session, let me just tell to the audience that we have two perspective questions, one from the teacher's perspective and one from the student perspective. So we will start with the teacher's perspective, and then we will go along with the student perspective as well. So, Prof, should we start with the first question, please?
Sure, sure.
Okay. So now this question is from the teacher's perspective, and they want to ask that, Prof, please guide us Can there is a replacement of teacher by robots be a consequence of the development of information technologies, particularly in higher education? And second part of the same question is, can e-learning be a substitute for a teacher? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haider. And this question it's quite interesting because I remember a couple of years ago when I attended a conference and I was presenting, and this senior teacher stood up and asked me the exact same question. I think almost 10 years has gone, and we are still here. A lot of teachers are still doing their job in teaching. Robots have not really taken over the role. And the question is not new, actually. If you read through the literature, if you go as far back in 1970s, when computer aided instruction or computer assisted language learning or computer assisted learning, all this movement started happening during that time, even before we managed to get that, like a decent computers at home. People have been talking. People have been talking whether a computer will take over the role of a teacher and all that. My take on this is quite simple. Robots or technology will not take over a teacher who is capable of using it to teach well. If you are a teacher who are not embracing technology, if you are a teacher who is still doing something like 30, 40 years ago without any adaptation to the current trend, then you probably will be replaced because you are not adapting to the change. But if you are a person who is embracing the change and realizing the fact that you have to embrace the use of technology in your teaching and learning processes or activities, then you will never be replaced. Because we have to accept that technology is a tool. It's just like you ask a mechanic, right? I mean, 50 years, 60 years ago, we don't have robot fixing our car, right? Even now, with all these robot fixing our car, we still have mechanics. Mechanics are still running the job because the brain comes from human being, and they still use all these tools, the screwdriver or whatever tools they have. So you can rely on the robots to do some small things or some repetitive action, but you still need a human being to fix a real problem. Same thing in teaching or in education. If you realize your role has not changed for the past 20, 30 years, then it's high time for you to rethink of your role, instead of just playing the previous role that you were playing for the past few years. You might want to think, what else can you do to enhance your teaching and learning ability or maybe competency, so that you are not left behind and you will never be replaced. In fact, if you are asking about a general idea, I do believe humans are all humans. Even if we can learn things online, if you ask yourself, you can learn a lot of things online, but it makes a difference when you have a person right next to you teaching you, right? I mean, no matter how many videos you've gone through on YouTube, if there's a person next to you teaching you, you feel you have a different sense of belonging and different sense of community, and you love that and you learn faster because it's just human nature to be taught that way. So regardless of how many media or how many content available online now, despite all this abundance of information, we still go back to the human part of it, right? Like I was giving one example. If my student came to me and asked a question, I have the urge to say, you can just Google it, right? But when that happened to me, I said, maybe it's better for me to explain, even though the answer is already there. So I'll try my best to answer in a different way. And like, you can call him up or call the student up or maybe arrange a session to meet and all that. It feels different, and that learning stays with them longer than the things that they learned online. But again, this takes a bit of skills. So if you are not doing the right way, perhaps if you are just diverting your student to all this content available online, this is where you will be replaced. You are just diverting them to different content. You need to remember that teaching is not a content provider. You are actually a teacher or an educator, somebody who is providing more than just content. You're creating an experience. As I mentioned earlier in our previous section, if you want to make sure the learning is meaningful, you have to set your aim as creating the meaningful experience. And meaningful experience doesn't come only by providing content. Yeah, I mean
Wow.
that's my overall summary.
Wonderful, wonderful answer to that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why I loved your conversation and discussion on the topic, because you gave a wonderful expert opinion on that. And I loved the way you gave the answer of the change management, that and you have to change yourself. And in order to make it more meaningful, the teacher is there, and teacher cannot be a substitute for a content. Yes, very nicely said. And that brings me to the another question, which is very much similar, and they want to have your opinion, since you talk about the change management as well, that you have to manage the change.
yeah.
Now that there is another question by the teachers community, and they want to ask that please share your opinion as an expert. We are moving fast towards the e-learning. Is it a blessing or curse? Because for some old-fashioned teachers, it is kind of curse, but for the people who are from younger generation, for them it is a kind of blessing. So, what's your opinion on that? Yes, please.
I mean, as mentioned earlier, it really depends on where you are as well. In certain area, like when a lot of students are isolated from technology, then your role as the traditional teacher, I don't really like the word traditional, but that's how people call traditional teachers. I mean, teachers who are not really into technology will play a greater role, because the community within that area may not be exposed to technology. So you are still, you can still play your role as a person who use the conventional way of face-to-face teaching and all that. But I think even now in rural area, or in a lot of rural community, people are moving, right? A lot of youth, the younger ones, they're moving to areas where they are connected. And if they are not embracing this change, they will be left behind as well, because in the after school, or when they've completed their degree, they need to cope with all this technological demand that they will face. So in terms of teacher, or as a teacher who may not be comfortable with teaching, same case in Malaysia, we have a lot of senior teachers who are not comfortable. um, I wouldn't say like e-learning is like the solution. I'm treating e-learning just like like a tool, or an alternative, right? So you need to make sure that if you are not comfortable using all these tools, all these e-learning platform or tools or application, you might want to consider working with someone who can. In Malaysia, we call that like a peer system, or peer helper and all that. Or some countries call it teaching assistant, or assistant teacher. So combine yourself with these kind of people, so that you can along the way pick up some of the tools and teach, right? But there's also one mindset that is quite hard to change. Some teachers will say, oh, I have another 1 or 2 years to go, I will be retiring, so I don't need all this hassle. Yeah, to be honest, it's quite true, because since you'll be retiring soon, you may not need that hassle of learning all these skills just to cover a 1 or another 2 years of teaching. But imagine if your last 1 or 2 years of teaching can be a memorable one, where you actually learn something, maybe not everything, but 1 or 2 tools that you have never used in your life, or in your teaching career. Suddenly, within the last 2 years of your teaching, you use 1 or 2 tools that you include in your teaching, and that would makes a lot of difference in your life as well, because you'll be remembering this moment as a teacher who has changed during the last part of your career. So to say e-learning will replace completely, or will be the thing, no. I personally believe in hybrid. I always believe that. I don't really agree in total, like fully online learning, or fully distant learning, even though that's the trend now, because of the internet capability, actually. Last time, it's very hard for us to do this. Like, you're in Pakistan, I'm in Malaysia, it's very hard for us to do this. And distant learning may not be that popular. But because of technology, now I can talk to you like I'm next to you, right? So it feels a bit closer. It feels a bit, that the social presence is there. You feel like you are among the community. But I personally believe, you're talking about students, especially the younger ones in primary schools onwards, elementary school onwards, they need that human presence. So looking at the screen all the time may not be healthy as well. So I personally believe you need a mix of both. So yeah, in terms of best practices, we can talk longer on that, maybe in a separate session. But it's always good to balance certain part where you can do it online or virtually. You try your best to use some tools to cover those certain things that you need to do in a practical mode or hands-on mode, then you do it in hands-on mode. I believe in this merging because after all, these learners or these students, when they go into the working world or the market, they need to cope with this as well. Because not only in education, in other sectors as well. If you talk about robots, I think in the industry, in the manufacturing industry, robots are more prevalent, right? You see all this robot taking over the jobs because a factory that used to use 1,000 workers may only need 500 now because another 500 were replaced by robots or all this system that they create. So those are in manufacturing world. So what kind of human beings do you want to groom so that they can fit into all these job markets? So education is one way to address this by letting them feel the need for both rather than totally say, oh, we don't want to use e-learning, we don't want to use technology, because later on they were gonna, they're going to have to experience it anyway, right? Yeah.
Very nicely said, and thank you very much. I really believed what you said is so great that yes, if the teacher is going to be retired in next 2 years, why don't he or she
Yep.
still strive to learn some new things? And you have really mentioned in a nice way that that would be their memories, that we have learned certain new tools and certain new things at the end of even their career, but still it is great to learn certain new things. And
Yep.
this is what our recommendation is, that always keep on learning and keep adding the skills that will help you to deliver in a better way. Wonderful answer to that. And the another question is similarly related to it. Just have a quick view of that. How do you see it? Because this is again from the teacher's perspective. They want
Yep.
to ask you that, Prof, please guide us. What role do you visualize for teachers in this digital technologies era, and how do you see the future perspective teachers? Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is, yeah, related to the previous question in terms of the role. Um, if I think it depends on the level. If you are at the, maybe at primary or elementary level, then your role would be more like a, you play more roles in guiding them. As you progress to high school or secondary school, then your role will be diminishing quite a lot until the universities. I think like a lot of lecturers in universities, for example, now they are more like a facilitator, so they don't really play the traditional role of a teacher. But in elementary schools, I think the role of teacher is still pretty traditional because kids, they still need you to be there. But slowly as you progress along the level, then you realize your role is going to be diminishing. So I think the trend now in 21st century learning, we don't see ourselves as like I mentioned just now, a content provider. We are more like creating the learning experience. So you are the creator of the experience. You can have a lot of material in front of you. You can just treat technology like a textbook, like all these books that you normally have in an old classroom, where when we don't have technology, we only have books, textbooks, or whatever books you have in the class. If you just put the books there, the student may not be picking up the books to read. But because you are a teacher, you know how to make use of those books so that they will be able to read, they will be able to appreciate whatever is, presented in the books. You create the experience, and then they'll do activities. They will flip through the book just to answer your questions. They will do some projects. Those are the role of teacher these days. You are creating that experience, not so much about telling them, okay, page one contains one, two, three, so you please memorize. Those are old days, old ways, because that kind of experience are not so meaningful after all. They will be memorizing, and then in the exam they will just recall everything. So that experience will not stay long. Ask any students, right? If you ask anyone, even us now, if you ask me, what is the most meaningful or memorable moment when you are in schools, you will definitely remember those teachers who do all this kind of experiment projects or something outside of the normal way of teaching using the books. Now, if you replace the books or textbooks with technology, it's the same thing. I mean, technologies are out there, or all these digital contents are out there. So your role is not just to put them there and send it to them. Your role is, how are you going to make use of all these materials, all these tools to create that kind of experience? And I reminded a lot of teachers in Malaysia as well, you don't need so many tools. You pick those that you are really comfortable in. You can reuse it as many times as you want, but make sure the tools are creating that kind of experience that you want them to experience, right? Not something that not really effective, but then you keep doing it. So if you realize that that tool is not really effective in doing whatever you want to achieve, then you might want to turn to another tool or another application or another platform. For example, you might want to do a bit of research, or online, or maybe ask help, ask what are the best ways to kind of address the problem that you're facing. So you don't need many, right? Like I told my teacher trainee, for example, you just need to learn one every year, the least. That's the least you can go. Let's say this year you learn about StreamYard. I'm using this example. You have never heard of StreamYard, but because of Kalwas or Dr. Haider kept on using StreamYard, oh, you find StreamYard is quite useful. Maybe you try it this year in your class. Instead of using other tools in teaching, you use StreamYard to create some, invite some students to your StreamYard and then discuss some topics together and all that. And if you're comfortable doing that, and then the impact is there, the student appreciate your effort, and the learning is happening, they enjoy it so much, it means it's working. Then you can keep using it, and next year you try another tool, right? I mean, I'm using a very simple example. Of course, teachers, whenever they hear the word technology, or when they are told to use technology, they get overwhelmed. They thought technology is something like, I have to learn how to operate a complicated software, or I have to learn how to run a computer. No, you don't have to, right? So make use of something that create experience. For example, last time you don't have, if you want to show something, you need to rely on diagram or pictures print out, right? And it's not that interactive. But because of technology now, you can make it more interactive, right? You can use videos, you can use even videos now, you can do some tagging. That changes the experience altogether. That's what I meant. Same content, if you know how to use different technology, it creates a different experience. That's what we want to achieve in education these days. And teachers who are able to do that will be deeply, appreciated. And of course, whatever you do sometimes may not result in performance. I have to say this because I know your struggle in making the change, but the student may not be responding like totally well. It's okay. Even if you have like 20% or 30% of students are responding to it slowly, you try to make some adjustment or try to make some changes so that you can cover more. As we mentioned, in the previous session, it's impossible for you to actually reach 100% acceptance or 100% engagement to all your students. Even even when before technology, right? If you ask any teacher, no one can actually guarantee you that every single student in his or her class are motivated or are really learning from you, because there are other factors playing as well, right? Family factors, socioeconomic factors. There's so many factors around them, and their well-being as well. So your job as a teacher is to just do your best to create the best experience for your learners, and again, make it meaningful to you and also to your students. Yeah.
Yes, very nice. Thank you for such an elaborative answer. I really enjoyed the way you give answer, because you give a lot of examples and you relate the different things in a way that it becomes very easy to understand. And really, that's the, I would say that that's the best insights for the teachers and for the students as well, to learn about that how do they see their future roles for that perspective. Now we are coming up to the student perspective and their concerns, which are very, I would say, genuine, and they are really care about it, because they see their career, they take life seriously. So their first question is, dear Prof, please guide us. How would you validate an e-learning degree as an employer? How do employers see the virtual degrees and what is the importance of virtual degrees? Please tell us from employer perspective, is it worthy enough? Yes, please.
I think again the verification or the validity of online degree or virtual degree depend a lot on the policy within each country. I think because like in Malaysia, we do have fully online degrees offered and all that, and it's controlled by our accreditation agency and all that. So I'm not sure in Pakistan. I'm sure there is also an agency to control that. So it really depends on how well this agency or this authority is doing in ensuring that whatever is done online or virtually is not like a toned down version, or maybe like a like an easy route for you to get a degree, because there is that kind of concept where if you do it online it's easier and you still get a degree. So in terms of validity, I think that really depends on the policy or maybe the legal legality within each country. But in general, I can say you need to do your own research as a student. If you ask me, I would do my own research. I would check whether this degree is really useful, or the way they do the assessment are really properly done, like they actually assess you. If you attend some some courses or some degree programs and suddenly there's no assessment, you suddenly get a certification, something is not right. I mean, you yourself will feel like something is fishy, because why am I getting certified when I did nothing, right? So I think it goes back to you as well. Do you want that, right? If you pay a certain amount of money and you didn't get anything, like no experience, no teaching, do you really want that? And you know that you're not learning anything. Even if you get a degree or if you get a certificate, it may not be helpful because you yourself know you're not learning anything. And in terms of from the employer's point of view, in Malaysia, I think they are still very skeptical on this. Not many companies would really like treat you like an automatic kind of recognition, because they will normally they will do their own checking in a way. Like if you have a virtual degree or a certification in whatever field or whatever discipline, if you're applying for jobs, for example, the easiest way to know whether you are qualified will be to give you a test, right? So let's say you try to go into a big company like Microsoft, for example. You want to work with Microsoft, and you claim that you have a virtual degree in computer science from, let's say, University A, right? That's whatever you have on your hand now, on your paper, on the paper, stated clearly that you have a degree in computer science from University A. Now, if you apply for Microsoft, I'm sure Microsoft will not just treat it like that. Will not just, you know, go and verify University A and so on. They most likely will just ask you to sit for a test, right? Their own test, of course, right? I think a lot of companies these days they have their own internal tests as well. So they will ask you to do some maybe programming tasks and all that. And turns out you don't know how to do it, then they will not get you in. Basically, I think that the world has changed a lot in that sense. Even if you have a real degree from a physical university or the conventional program, it's the same thing, same problem as well. Because a lot of companies these days they want to verify whether you have that skill set. So it's gonna be very challenging. I'm not sure in Pakistan, but in Malaysia, people are really struggling. Even graduates from universities are struggling to get jobs because of this reason. Whatever you get on paper is not sufficient these days. You really need to go higher by proving that you can do it. Yeah, to be honest, whether they're gonna recognize virtual degree or online degree, that could take some time. But I think as a student, you can take a virtual degree, but if you really learn from the process and you really master through the skills that you are supposed to master, then I think you'll be well prepared because you have the skill set needed. So degree is just a formal recognition of your ability, or maybe a formal recognition of your effort. So from of course, from another perspective, is like you're giving a lot of money because you're paying a lot of the fee and all that. You might want to consider that as well. Is it worth it? Online degree, I think I mentioned in the previous session, it may not be cheap, right? Some online degrees are quite expensive, and so you need to weigh all these factors. If you pay a certain amount of money, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical learning, if you get back the return, not in terms of money, but in terms of the experience, you get renowned professors to teach you. You get really good tutorial. You really get a lot of supervision. A lot of things that you don't get outside. Then it's worth it. But if you pay a certain amount, but you don't really get all those, you only get access to PDF or PPT, then something is not right, right? So you might want to perhaps reconsider that kind of program. So you need to do a bit of research and check through. And if you notice something not right, then you might want to perhaps just stop or try another pathway. Yeah.
Very nicely said, Prof. I'm really enjoying the way you are answering. And I think you have very nicely highlighted a very important perspective from both sides. One from the regulatory body, the agency, that how do they control? Because
Yep.
primarily it's their responsibility to make sure that virtual university XYZ is complying all the rules and regulation properly, and they have the sufficient infrastructure and sufficient content and teachers for that perspective, which is very
Yep.
important perspective you have highlighted very nicely.
Yep.
And secondly, I love the part of when you shift it to the students' personal responsibility as well,
Yeah.
that how they are going to assess the XYZ university for which they are paying actually, and how they are going to weigh between the pros and cons, that what they are learning out of that degree and whether it is fine or not. So I think really the responsibility lies on both sides, not only the university but the student as well, and they are better in a position to understand that what they need to do and how can they evaluate the university for that perspective.
Yep.
And very nicely you have mentioned another important aspect, that nowadays the companies, they are more concerned regarding your skills, and they go for the testing, and they will just ask you that whatever you claim, just prove it, whether you
Yep.
have these kinds of skills or not, because written things are different, and having the right capabilities and understanding, that is a different thing. So I think you have given a wonderful blend of things which needs to be considered for that question, so in order to get the proper employment for that perspective. Wonderful answer for that. Perfect. Another question is very much concern the students regarding the learning capabilities, the reading capability. So they want to ask your
Mm.
opinion in that, Prof. How do you see the e-learning systems which affect the conventional library system? Because of digitalization now, most of the time we get the soft copies of the books. So don't you think our reading habits are affected by the soft copies, or we are losing the conventional library system to go to library and sit and read over there? What's your view on that? Yes, please. Now these are the concerns of the students.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I I did kind of like a mini research on this, and if you even if you check through the previous studies done in this area, screen reading is actually not healthy to for our cognition, and this is why I think students have problem reading these days, uh, even writing too. When was the last time you pick up a pen and write a full essay, right? Most likely will be during exam. Most of the time you'll be typing, even your assignments, your whatever posting is all typing. The time when you write are most likely very minimal as compared to before. So the younger generation these days, they don't really know how to write. They have poor handwriting. They don't know how to spell well because of that habit of using typing, and you have autocorrect and everything, so it's fixing a lot of problem for you. Same thing with reading. And there was one article that I did as well on web text reading, and we realized we use this eye tracking movement on a lot of students. And what we realize is when it's on screen, you tend to be diverted a lot, and you don't read like a normal reading flow. So you tend to be distracted after a few paragraphs, and then you will just lose everything. Then you will just start scrolling, and then you just get the gist of it. That's it. So a whole article that normally can take, let's say, 5 minutes, you end up with only 1 minute because you just glance through, you just pick up some of the key sentences, and then probably you will do some summary on your head, and then you will just say, oh, okay, I finished reading this article, and this article is about this. But you probably miss out some important things in between. That's the problem that we are facing now. And I think it's a prevalent problem. A lot of researchers are trying to check on this. Same thing with younger kids. If you have younger kids at home, if you see how they browse through the storybooks, the virtual version, I mean the ebooks, right? You see how fast they flip through. They don't really read every, not like touching the physical book and then you read, because when you have a physical book, the tendency of you to scroll is, of course you can't scroll one thing, but the tendency for you to flip through and all that will be lower because you need to read word per word. It's because of that size of the paper and everything. So it was quite nicely arranged for that reading kind of habit. So if you are talking about the impact effect, it's definitely there. Just that maybe uh, the current pool of research may not show a significant difference. I mean, the difference is there, but not that big yet, because it's quite hard to do this kind of research. You need a really large pool of people to actually track their eyes and all that, and then test their reading ability. But if you're talking about test scores and all that, you will see why if you do a computer-based testing, like computer-based reading, as compared to the one with the conventional on paper reading, you will realize the computer-based one normally will have more problems. They will miss out a lot of information. Those with paper, because you have the chance to highlight, easier. You can use your pen to scribble some keywords and all. Even though in the digital form you can do that, but very very rare, right? You don't really do that. Even if you have the capability, but it's very rare for you to use all these digital tools unless you are using a tablet and all that. But that difference is there, but I wouldn't say it's huge at the moment. But if you ask me personally, I do believe that students needs to go to library and then pick up all these physical books. Even if the world is heading towards technology, even myself, I try to discipline myself to get books, even journals. Even you have online journal articles and all that. I have a habit of printing it, even though my friends will be calling me, you are killing a lot of trees. I said I can't be reading from the screen all the time because it's not good for my for my, even for your eyes or even for your cognition. So you need to maybe make it a habit of some, like an alternate behavior kind of thing. Like maybe today you're going to read some digital version, and then make it a habit like tomorrow you're going to read some physical book. So I think that would help. So for students, by the way, if you're in universities with good access to library, make use of them. Don't just depend on Google and all this internet. Just go to the library, get some books and read. You'll see the difference in terms of the way you train your brain, because our brains is like like our muscle as well. The more you train it, the better it is. If you just leave it as an absorber, like a sponge, then it will not be doing miracle to you. If you keep training it to do some difficult tasks like reading, for example, which is quite difficult, to force it to actually read word per word and all that, you are training your brain to be better. Same thing like writing as well. Typing, it's easier than holding a pen and control it to write something, because you're training your brain to control your hand, to control the pen, so that it can write well. So it's a totally different kind of process. So the more you do that, then your brain will be better, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Once again, I'm really enjoying. Perfect answer for that. It's not the substitute, and mostly when I was doing my PhD from University of Malaya, we were told that get the article printed so that you do not miss anything and you
Yeah.
go through the whole article properly, which you
Exactly.
have mentioned. The same that you will not miss because of the page size and everything. You will go through each and every information. And secondly, they used to tell us that why don't you go to library and dig it further through books, because the more in-depth knowledge in the books.
Yeah.
So you have to go through. And very nicely you have mentioned that yes, once we do it with the soft copy, so we flip very quickly and we switch to the another book and another things. It is kind of distracting because you are watching one particular content, and then suddenly in the another text book of the soft copy you find another thing which is actually the different thing.
Yeah.
So stick to the one point, learn it appropriately with in-depth knowledge, because particularly for the students, they must have the in-depth knowledge, not the superficial knowledge regarding
Agree.
anything, which is recommended. Wonderful answer to that thing. And now there is one another student, and they want to ask that, Prof, I am the master student, and I am very much passionate about the e-learning styles. So
Mm.
please guide me. My research questions. One of the research question is: do e-learning styles differ by gender? How do you see this research question? Is it fine to go along with that? Yes, please.
Okay, okay. Uh, E-learning style, it's quite tricky to call it e-learning style. Maybe you have to look back at the term e-learning style. Are you talking about the readiness to use e-learning, or the strategies that people use in using in using the e-learning? That requires a bit of how to put it, a bit of fine tuning in making it better, because I don't think e-learning style is it's a proper term for this. So you might want to be specific in terms of using it for learning or using it for teaching. Like e-learning teaching strategies will mean a different thing. If you talk about e-learning readiness, then it will be a different thing as well. So you might want to be more specific on that. But gender wise, I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of the variable gender, it's good to look into that. But the more pertinent problem here, I mean, the more important problem here would be the term e-learning style that you are trying to investigate. What do you mean by that? So if you can make it more specific, or make it more maybe refer to existing literature, try to use something which is already widely used in literature, rather than you coin a new word, because if you create a new word, it will be confusing and people may not understand. But because if you talk about learning style, like I mentioned in our previous session, learning style alone will be a different thing. Learning style, as in, people claim to be visual learners, auditory learners, like, which I told you are quite myth, because you don't really categorize by this kind of learning style. So yeah, so e-learning style and all that, you might want to define that clearly, because if you are using the old learning style as a branding, or like a categorization, that will be tricky, because e-learning is essentially multimedia, right? You have visual, you have audio, everything together. So it's going to be very hard for you to group them into, okay, I'm more to visual, I'm more to uh, audio, or I'm more to kinesthetic, like movement, and all. It's going to be hard. So you might want to be more specific on that. Gender, in terms of technological adoption, I think if you read through a lot of literature, they will always say male tend to be more comfortable with technology, female tend to be less comfortable. So if your result later are signaling the same thing, then you might want to consider different variable, because it's already known kind of outcome. So you might want to change that, maybe in terms of experience, maybe learning experience, teaching experience, or maybe in terms of the other factors, like exposure to technology, or maybe the frequency of use at home, or something like that, rather than gender. Because you can do that, I'm not saying you can't. Gender is still widely studied, just that the typical result will show you that the male uh, participant tend to favor technology more than the female. I think it's quite popular on social media. You can see a lot of male are more comfortable, but then I think the trend has changed a bit in terms of content creation for online setting. What I noticed was the female content providers are more creative as compared to the male counterpart. I mean, uh, you can look into that as well in terms of creativity, because somehow the female content creators, they are more creative in that sense, because the male content provider tend to be more technical. Like if you are teaching A, you will just go 1, 2, 3. The female will think of different ways. They will add some sketches, or some music, just to make it fun to learn it. So yeah, something for you to consider. I mean, for the student to consider.
Yes, superb answer, Prof. Really, again, you have given a blend of the things which needs to be considered, and which are different variables which actually affect the relationship as well, and they need
Yeah.
to consider. And I loved the way you mentioned the creativity perspective, that That would be the interesting study, because the previous studies are there. They can take the direction and they can see that as well, that who is creative and why,
Yeah.
what are the different reasons for that. And that's the beauty of the research, that we try to explore the relationships and then we come up with the theoretical explanation and then the implication of that. Really nice. We have already taken a lot of your time. One last question, which
Sure.
comprise of the two parts. The first part, the part A, is they want to ask that, Prof, as a teacher, how to assess that online class was successful by all standards? And second part of the question is, which is personal. They want to ask that, Prof, which one you personally prefer, online learning teaching or traditional conventional classroom environment, based on the pros and cons, as you discussed very nicely in your previous session as well, that these are the strengths and weaknesses of online learning and the traditional learning or conventional learning. But which one do you prefer? They want to know that as well. Yes, please.
So the first question was what was it again? Sorry, I missed the first question.
Yeah,
Was
the first question is, how can they assess that
yeah,
online
yeah.
class was successful by all standards?
By
Yes,
if because I was missing that last part, by all standards, because by all standards is quite big. And the way I see it in terms of online learning or online experience, ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, it has to go back to whether you achieve the learning goals or the learning outcomes, the objective of that particular lesson. What do you want them to achieve from the start or in the beginning? Let's say if your aim for that particular session, let's say a 30 minutes or maybe a 1 hour session, you want student to learn A. So if the student have picked up A, then it's considered as successful. So in terms of measuring this, I can't really pinpoint like a one exact tool, but I believe in how to put it, multi-instrument kind of thing. So you don't rely on one, like only test scores. You might want to do a bit of observation as well on your own, or in my case, I do recordings even in physical class. I would record my own teaching, and then I would do some reflection. What went wrong during my session, or why are those students are not responding to me. I'll do my own notes, and then of course the test score will be also used to measure whether they have learned whatever I have taught them. So the test score may not be a physical test like a graded test. It could be some formative assessment that you do online, or maybe you do it in class, but it's not really graded. It's something for you to check whether they have learned whatever you want them to learn. So if you are saying by all standard, it's very hard to achieve, but it's possible if you do uh, like a multi instrument kind of observation, or measurement, rather than rely on only on the test. Normally teacher will go for evaluation. They will give out some handout and then ask student to rate. I think to me that's not so meaningful, because students tend to be, if they like you, they will give you high score even though the learning may not be that meaningful. So you might want to do some testing, proper testing, check in terms of what they have mastered. Also do your own observation, like when you're teaching, are you talking too much, are you giving too much, or why majority are not responding to your question, why some are sleeping, that kind of thing. I mean, once you do this, you don't have to do this all the time. Once you do this quite in the beginning of your session, then you're gonna do this naturally. You don't need a proper log or a proper recording. Before this, when I started teaching, I did that a lot. I do a lot of recording on my own, because I always have this like a, how to put it, like a trust issue with myself. I always think that I'm not good enough. I was in that kind of mindset. So I always observe, maybe my instructions were not that clear. That's why the student were not really responding and so on. But once you do this a lot, then you don't need it anymore. It's like it becomes natural. The moment you're teaching in front, you realize, okay, I need to reword my instruction because the student do not understand me, or the responses are not what I want them to give, that kind of thing. So I think ultimately is whether you have achieved the learning goals, and then try to use different ways of measuring. Not don't rely on one single test or one single evaluation form. Do a lot of reflection, do a lot of observation as well. Then it will give a better indicator of your performance or your successfulness, if you want to go on that. And so in my universities, for example, when we come up with the criteria for evaluating how good you are in adopting technology, we don't do like a evaluation form. We will ask you to document it, like provide evidences in terms of the recordings or maybe your portfolio if you compile materials and all that, and students work, because the student output will reflect that, right? If you teach A, the output is magnificent or amazing, that means you have done well, right? If the output, the students works are all terrible or not up to the standard, then it means something is not right. It could be the process, it could be the content itself. There are many reasons for that, so you need to do a lot of reflection. And then the second part of the question is my personal preference. I think I mentioned earlier just now, but to be more exact, I personally prefer physical, right? Physical. But I see the beauty of technology. So even in my physical classes, I use a lot of blended learning or hybrid learning, whatever you want to call it. So it's blend of both. What happened is I still meet my students physically, but when they come to my class, there are certain portion of my session where it will involve virtual activities or some blended activities. So, for example, a discussion in group. Normally, if you do in a normal class, they will just sit there and discuss, and probably you will walk around, right? You will be walking around and maybe monitor them talking. Last time you had to do that, but now because of technology, you can ask them to document the discussion online. So, like, you can have a platform, like I'm using some platform where when they are discussing, someone is taking note and put it online, put it on the platform that you have set. You can record audio or whatever. Then by the end of the session or discussion, you have all set of data or all set of materials that they have discussed, as compared to before. Because by the time you walk from one table to another table or one group to another group, you might miss out a lot of things. Now they document it for you. Then when you are explaining, you can reuse all this that they have given you, that they have documented. You can reuse it and then use it as in your explanation. So they will appreciate that, because they know that whatever they're doing in the class is being used to enhance the understanding or to improve their understanding. It's not just for discussion's sake, right? Or that's how I see the way forward in terms of technology. Like I said, human are still human. We still love to be with people around, but when it comes to technological adoption or tools, you use it to enhance the process more than just thinking whether you will be replaced or the content will be replaced. It's more to creating that experience, and you'll see a difference. Really, I don't know whether you can do this, but if you have never tried this before, you might want to try it out first. And I mean, slowly. You don't have to force yourself. Try to use some tools in your teaching itself, rather than just relying on PowerPoint and slides altogether. Put some activities where when they do it, you get to document it, and then you reuse it in your teaching and all that. See the difference in terms of the way they react to your teaching. You I can kind of guarantee you that you will see some positive feedback or positive response. Is unless of course you're dealing with a special kind of student where may need a different types of attention. I do have that kind of group as well, where there are certain group which may not need technology to motivate them, because they may think that whatever you are doing online is extraneous or too hard for them or too difficult for them. You might have that group as well, so you deal with that kind of group differently. But majority, I think, I would say I would go for blended or hybrid. Even if throughout my years of teaching, the students have been giving a lot of positive feedback. Whenever they tend to compare. Like, I mean, students will compare. They will tell you, like, if I enter your class, I get more than what I get from another class, which is using only slides, for example, or maybe only lecture for 3 hours, just listening to the professor talking nonstop for 3 hours. If I come to your class, not only I'll get your input, I also learn from the activities that you did and all that. So you can see this. So you don't want to be those that they don't want, right? You want to be those that they want to be in. So yeah, so it takes a bit of time, of course. Slowly you will realize what went wrong, what is working, what is not working, and then you tweak from time to time. Treat this process as an organic learning process, like It's not a linear process. It's going to be organic. It might work today, tomorrow it might not work. The next day you could be working again. So you treat it as an experience rather than like a linear process. When it doesn't work, then you stop altogether. So it's not really good to have that kind of mindset. Yeah.
Very
I hope
nicely
yeah.
said. Once again, really profile. I loved your answer. It is really that how you are going to engage the students in activity, and it's not just talking for 3 hours non-stop, not engaging them, and they
Yeah.
feel kind of bored. Yes, indeed, that's the wonderful part, and I think we should take the advantage of the technology, that we have the technology and we can use it in a right way to engage them in the creative activity, come up their answers, that why do they think in that way and how can we shape them in the right way.
Yep.
That is the wonderful part. And very nicely you have mentioned that it's not the linear process, it's the organic one. That's really that makes sense. That and Again, I would say in a superb way you have mentioned that you learn it, and you slowly learn it through experiences. And this is how actually we call the experience matters a lot,
Yeah.
because you have gone through a multiple students, and you know how to engage the weaker student and how to engage the talented student. What are the different strategies inside the class we use to have a balanced understanding and to create that environment. And
Yeah.
again, you have mentioned very rightly that student, they do compare, that we
Yes.
at the end of the lecture what they learn from you and what they learn from your counterparts. Actually, this is their level of understanding, and they judge you as a instructor, that how much you are giving them back, because they look forward for the content, for the delivery, and the
Yep.
skills as well. And I think that is why the teacher job is very special to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, it is a very responsible job. From right from the first minute to the last minute of your lecture, you are very attentive, you are very careful, what you are saying, how it is relevant, whether
Yeah.
it is to the mark, and have you covered the content and all these things. Actually, it's a very responsible job, and I would say it's
Mm.
a very wonderful job,
Yep.
because you are shaping lives of the people, and you are having impact on their lives, which are there for a
Exactly.
longer period. So wonderful answer. Thank you very much for so great insights you have provided for our audience, particularly for the teachers, because they had their concerns regarding the online, and you have very nicely mentioned the different important aspects which needs to be considered while delivering the meaningful online teaching, which you
Yeah.
referred and to the science.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful part. Thank you very much, Prof. Once again, it
No
was a
problem.
pleasure to have you, because in the first session we could not have this question
Yeah.
answer in detail. So you're very generous of you that you have given your precious time.
No
Now,
problem.
Prof, what is your message to the world as a speaker, author, teacher, researcher, trainer, learner, professional, and educator? Yes, please.
I think just maybe two words: keep learning, right? As in line with CHUAH's motto as well. We just have to keep learning. Even there's just too many things to learn every day, and keep that habit of learning and improve yourself. Yep.
Yes, wow, what a wonderful answer you have given. I think that is, you just squeeze the ocean into a drop. That yes, yes, keep on learning, keep improving, because the world is changing, the technology is changing, there is a dynamic competitive environment, and you have to be very skillful, you have to be very knowledgeable in nowadays in order to compete with them.
Yep.
So that's the wonderful part, and I would conclude it with your which you have started in the last session, that make it meaningful. That's the
Yep.
wonderful part. I love that part, and thank you very much for that.
Yep.
Indeed, making online learning meaningful through the science of learning is very technical aspect, and you need to develop your understanding regarding that. So take the advantage of all the information shared by the expert today in this session. So do follow our distinguished guest speaker through his research work. You can email him for future learning and guidance. He's very generous, and he has also shared his last time content with us, and we have emailed to the various attendees. And if you have not received, and if you want, you can email us at info@kalwas.com and we will email to you. And it has contained the expert contact information that you can contact him, you can reach him, and you can see his work. He is always there to help you further in this regard. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you once again, Dr. CHUAH.
Thank
Uh,
you so much.
Thank you. And I would also like to thank our audience who joined us. If you have any additional questions about the information shared today, please email to us or connect to the speaker directly through his social media and email addresses. Thank you all for your support and liking our session. Stay tuned as many sessions are on the way. Please do not miss any session. Until next session, take